The banishment, the freezing rain of Earth's northern wilderness cut through Thalia's thin garments, her luminescent skin dimming with each labored step. She clutched her 5-year-old son Jackson tighter against her chest, his small body trembling despite the warmth her own body struggled to provide. Her flowing silver-blue hair, once a crown of pride among the Celestials, now hung in damp strands around her face, collecting the tears she couldn't allow herself to shed. "Are we going to die, Mother?" Jackson whispered, his voice barely audible, above the howling wind. The delicate constellation patterns across his skin flickered weakly, their glow fading. A dangerous sign. "No, my starlight," Thalia murmured, summoning strength she didn't feel. "We will find shelter soon." 3 days had passed since their banishment from the Celestial Conclave. Elder Vorax's cold proclamation still echoed in her mind. "For the crime of refusing to surrender your genetically superior offspring to the Enhancement Division, you are hereby exiled. Your stars are forfeit." The ritual of removing their star markings, the highest symbols of status among their kind, had been excruciating. But watching them try to separate her from Jackson had awakened something primal in Thalia. She had fought, broken taboos, and fled with her son rather than allow him to become another experiment in their eugenic program. Now they wandered an unfamiliar planet, one the Conclave considered primitive but strategic. Humans knew nothing of the Celestials living secretly among them, harvesting genetic material to perfect their own declining race. As darkness fell, bringing even more bitter cold, Thalia spotted a faint glow on the horizon. Hope stirred within her for the first time in days. She adjusted her grip on Jackson and pressed forward, her bare feet numb in the mud. The structure that emerged from the gloom wasn't the sleek, bio-architectural designs of her people. It was rustic, angular, a farmhouse with warm yellow light, spilling from its windows. Smoke curled from a stone chimney promising warmth. Thalia hesitated at the edge of the property. Contact with humans was forbidden. They were considered genetically interesting but intellectually inferior by the Conclave. Yet what choice did she have? Jackson's skin had grown cold, his constellation patterns barely visible. A figure emerged from a nearby outbuilding, a human, male, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying what appeared to be farm tools. He froze when he noticed them standing in the rain, his weathered face registering surprise. "Please," Thalia called out in carefully practiced English. "My son needs warmth. We have nowhere else." The man approached cautiously, his dark eyes taking, in their strange appearance, the fading luminescence of their skin, their unusual coloring. Where fear or aggression might have been expected, his expression showed only concern. "You're not from around here," he stated simply, voice deep and rough like stone. "Not from anywhere near here, I'd guess." "No," Thalia admitted, too exhausted, for pretense. "We cannot return home. They took our stars." Something in his face softened. He glanced at Jackson's small form and then back at the vastness of the stormy night behind them. "I'm Roan," he said, setting down his tools. "This is my farm. Not much, but it's dry inside and there's food." He didn't wait for their response, simply turned toward the house, gesturing for them to follow. Thalia felt a strange sensation, relief mingled with wariness. "I'm Thalia," she said as she followed him. "This is my son, Jackson." Inside, the farmhouse was simple but comfortable. Roan moved with quiet efficiency, building up a fire in the stone hearth, gathering blankets, and preparing hot food. He asked, no questions about their strange appearance, their lack of possessions, or the faint glow emanating from their skin. As Jackson ate ravenously and his constellation pattern slowly brightened, Thalia studied their unexpected benefactor. There was something familiar in his solitude, in the careful way he moved, in the shadows behind his eyes. "Why help us?" she finally asked. "You don't know what we are." Roan looked up from the mug he was filling with steaming liquid. "I know. You're someone who needs help," he said simply. "The rest can wait for morning." That night, wrapped in borrowed blankets before the crackling fire, Jackson asleep beside her, Thalia gazed at the unfamiliar ceiling of a human dwelling and wondered what price this unexpected sanctuary would demand. In her experience, kindness always came with conditions, especially when given to those who came from the stars. Part 2. Sanctuary. Among strangers. Morning arrived with gentle rays streaming through handcrafted wooden shutters. Thalia woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting their exile until the unfamiliar sense of the farmhouse brought reality rushing back. Beside her, Jackson slept peacefully, his constellation patterns pulsing with renewed strength. The simple fact of his improved condition nearly brought tears to her eyes. The sound of movement in another room drew her attention. Rising quietly, she followed the noise to find Roan in what appeared to be a kitchen, preparing something over a flame. "You're up," he noted without turning. "Breakfast is almost ready. Nothing fancy, just eggs and bread." Thalia hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "We've imposed enough, perhaps we should..." "Should what?" Roan interrupted, finally turning to face her. In daylight, she could see him clearly. Weathered skin, dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, eyes the color of Earth's oceans. "Head back into the wilderness with a child? Winter's coming, first snow's due any day now. You don't understand." "The risk," Thalia said softly. "Those who might come looking for us, they're not kind." Roan's expression remained impassive. "Neither is freezing to death." He gestured to a worn wooden chair. "Sit, eat, then we'll talk." The food was unlike anything Thalia had consumed before, simple yet satisfying in a way the nutrient-optimized sustenance of the conclave never was. As they ate, Jackson woke and joined them, his eyes wide with curiosity about everything in the kitchen. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to a metal device on the counter. "Coffee grinder," Roan answered. "For beans. Makes a drink that helps humans wake up." "Do you have animals?" Jackson continued, his natural curiosity overcoming his usual caution. "I saw buildings outside." A small smile crossed Roan's face. "Sheep, chickens, couple of horses. You can see them after breakfast if your mother says it's okay." Thalia nodded permission, surprised by the easy way Roan addressed her son, not as a specimen of genetic interest, but as a child. When Jackson finished eating and went to look out the window, Roan's expression grew serious. "Now," he said quietly, "I've seen enough strange things in my life to know when someone's running. I don't need to know everything, but if there's danger coming to my farm, I should know what to expect." Thalia hesitated, weighing her options. Conclave law forbade revealing their true nature to humans, but those laws no longer protected her or Jackson. "We're not from Earth," she began, watching his face carefully for signs of disbelief or fear. "My people have observed humanity for generations. Some of us live among you, gathering genetic samples to improve our own species. Your constellation markings," Roan observed. "They're not tattoos. They respond to your emotions." Thalia's patterns brightened with surprise. "You're observant. Yes, they reflect our biological state and emotional condition. Jackson's patterns are rare, a mutation that makes him valuable to our scientists. They wanted to take him for experimentation. I refused. So they exiled you both," Roan finished for her. He was silent for a moment, processing. "And these people of yours, they have technology beyond ours?" "Yes. But the Conclave considers direct intervention in human affairs forbidden. They prefer subtle methods." Roan nodded slowly. "I was military before I became a farmer. Special forces. Saw things most civilians wouldn't believe, including an object that crashed in the desert that wasn't from any country on Earth." His eyes met hers. "I always figured we weren't alone." Thalia's patterns flashed with alarm. "You were involved with the crash recovery?" "Just security. Whatever it was got taken somewhere else. But I saw enough to know when I'm looking at something not from around here." He gestured toward her fading star markings. "Like those scars on your forehead. Fresh ones." Thalia's hand instinctively rose to the place where her stars had been forcibly removed. "Our highest honor. Taken as punishment." "Well," Roan said, rising to clear the dishes. "Seems to me anyone who'd punish a mother for protecting her child isn't worth honoring anyway." The simple judgment, delivered without hesitation, left Thalia speechless. All her life, the Conclave's authority had been absolute, their wisdom unquestioned. To hear their actions dismissed so easily by a human was both shocking and strangely liberating. "Jackson and I can work," she offered. "For our keep, I'm strong, and I learn quickly." Roan studied her for a moment. "Farm's too big for one person anyway. Winter preparations need extra hands." He nodded toward the window where Jackson was watching chickens in the yard. "Boy should be in school, but the nearest one's 30 miles. I've got books, though, plenty of them." "You're offering us sanctuary," Thalia stated, wanting clarity. "I'm offering a fair exchange," Roan corrected. "Work for shelter. What comes after we'll figure out as we go." As Thalia followed him outside to begin learning the routine of the farm, she realized this strange human had given them something the Conclave, with all its advanced civilization, had failed to provide: simple dignity and the chance to determine their own path. That night, watching Jackson sleeping peacefully after a day of excited exploration, Thalia allowed herself to hope that perhaps they had found not just temporary shelter, but a place where new stars might eventually grow. Part 3. Shadows from the Stars. 2 months passed on Roan's farm, bringing the full force of winter with howling winds and deep snow that transformed the landscape into an endless white expanse. Inside the farmhouse, however, warmth prevailed, not just from the constantly maintained fire in the hearth, but from the developing rhythm of their shared lives. Thalia had proven herself invaluable, her celestial dexterity and quick learning making her adept at everything from tending animals to repairing equipment. Jackson, meanwhile, absorbed knowledge from Roan's collection of books with startling speed, his inherited celestial intelligence blossoming under the freedom to explore subjects that interested him. On this particular evening, Thalia was mending clothes by the fire while Roan taught Jackson the fundamentals of Earth mathematics. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly. How easily they had fallen into this arrangement. How natural it felt despite the vast differences in their origins. "Mother, look!" Jackson exclaimed, his constellation patterns brightening with excitement. "Roan showed me how to calculate the area of our fields using these formulas." "Impressive," Thalia smiled, watching the way Roan ruffled her son's silvery hair with casual affection. Such a gesture would have been forbidden in the Conclave, where physical contact was strictly regulated, and children were considered community assets, rather than individuals to be cherished. Later, after Jackson had gone to bed, Thalia and Roan sat before the fire sharing the earthen drink he called whiskey. She had developed a taste for it. Another small rebellion against her former life, where altering one's consciousness was considered a deficiency of discipline. "Your markings," Roan said suddenly, gesturing toward her face. "They've changed." Thalia touched her forehead self-consciously. Where the star markings had been forcibly removed, new patterns had begun to form, fainter, different in design, but unmistakably alive. "It shouldn't be possible," she admitted. "The removal is supposed to be permanent, a genetic deactivation." "Yet here they are," Roan observed, leaning closer to examine the delicate new formations. His proximity sent a strange flutter through, her constellation patterns making them pulse with increased luminosity. "Adapting, evolving." "Perhaps Earth is changing us," Thalia suggested. "Your atmosphere contains elements uncommon on our worlds." Roan's eyes met hers, the firelight reflecting in their depths. "Or perhaps freedom changes people in ways oppression can't imagine." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility. Then a sharp beeping sound shattered the silence, making them both start. Roan was on his feet instantly, moving to a panel hidden behind a landscape painting. "Perimeter alarm," he explained tersely, punching in a code that brought up a grid display of the property. Something crossed the boundary line on the north side. "Animals?" Thalia asked, already knowing the answer as dread pooled in her stomach. "In this weather? Not likely." Roan opened a cabinet, revealing an array of weapons that confirmed his military background was no exaggeration. "Stay here with Jackson. Lock the doors behind me." "No." Thalia rose, her constellation patterns pulsing with determination. If it's the Conclave, they've come for us. This is our fight, not yours. My farm, my fight, Roan countered, checking a compact energy weapon that looked decidedly non-standard for Earth technology. Seeing her surprise, he added, "Let's just say that crashed object I mentioned left some interesting souvenirs before. The government types carted it away." Before they could argue further, a new alert sounded. This one from the back entrance. "They're surrounding us," Thalia whispered, her worst fears confirmed. "Conclave tactical formation. They'll have a neutralizer for my abilities." Roan's expression hardened. "Get Jackson. There's a shelter beneath the barn. Reinforced. Stocked for emergencies." As Thalia moved toward her son's room, a blinding light flashed through the windows, followed by a deep, resonant hum that made the floorboards vibrate. Her constellation patterns flickered in response, recognizing the frequency. "Transport beam," she gasped. "Large vessel. This isn't a recovery team, it's an extraction squadron." The front door burst open with a splintering crash. 3 tall figures entered, their bodies encased in iridescent armor that pulsed with energy. Their faces were obscured by helmets, but Thalia recognized the insignia on their chests. Elite guardians of the Conclave, deployed only for the most high-value retrievals. "Thalia of the 7th Constellation," the lead figure announced, voice distorted through the helmet. "By order of the High Council, you and the genetic variant designated Jackson are to be returned for reintegration." "Reintegration?" Thalia laughed, bitterly. "You mean dissection and experimentation." Roan moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between Thalia and the intruders. "This is private property. You're trespassing." The lead guardian tilted its helmet. "The primitive speaks, as if it has authority. Amusing. This primitive," Roan replied calmly, "is giving you one chance to leave peacefully." The guardian raised a device, sleek, silver, humming with power. "Cooperation is preferable, but not required." What happened next occurred so quickly that Thalia barely registered the sequence. Roan fired his weapon, sending one guardian crashing backward. The second guardian lunged forward, only to be met with a combat maneuver that belied Roan's farmer appearance. The third aimed its device at Thalia, but before it could fire, a blinding flash of light erupted from Jackson's room. The boy stood in the doorway, his constellation patterns blazing with unprecedented brilliance, tendrils of energy crackling around his small form. "Leave my mother alone," he commanded, his voice overlaid with harmonics that made the windows vibrate. "Leave our home alone." The remaining guardians froze, their helmet sensors fluctuating wildly as they attempted to process the energy signature emanating from the child. "Impossible," one whispered. "The variant was not projected to manifest until maturity." Thalia stared at her son in wonder and fear. The genetic potential the Conclave had identified was manifesting, but in ways none of them had predicted, accelerated perhaps by Earth's environment or the absence of Conclave suppressants. As the standoff teetered on the edge of violence, Thalia realized their peaceful sanctuary had ended. Whatever came next would determine not just their fate, but possibly the relationship between two worlds that had existed in secret parallel for generations. The Alliance. The guardian closest to Jackson raised its weapon, the device emitting a high-pitched whine as it charged. Thalia lunged forward, her maternal instinct overriding all caution, but Roan was faster, with precision that spoke of years of combat training. He threw a small metallic sphere that exploded in a burst of electromagnetic energy. The Guardians' armor systems flickered and failed, their weapons dropping uselessly to the floor. "EMP grenade," Roan explained tersely. "Won't last long." He grabbed Thalia's hand and reached for Jackson, whose constellation patterns were still blazing with unprecedented power. The moment Roan's fingers touched the boy's shoulder, a strange resonance occurred. The energy surrounding Jackson seemed to recognize something in Roan, coiling around his arm like luminous vines seeking purchase. "What's happening?" Roan asked, voice tight but steady. "I don't know. Thalia admitted, watching in astonishment as tendrils of Jackson's energy formed complex patterns along Roan's skin. This isn't documented in any conclave research. One of the Guardian struggled to its feet, helmet visor cracking open to reveal a face marked with elaborate constellation patterns. Senior Commander Peridon, one of the Conclave's most decorated officers. His expression registered shock as he observed the energy transfer. Genetic resonance, he breathed. Between species. Impossible. Thalia's mind raced through possibilities. The Conclave had always maintained that humans were genetically incompatible with Celestials, a convenient belief that justified their secret harvesting programs. But what if that fundamental assumption was flawed? We need to move, Roan urged, the temporary paralysis of the Guardians already beginning to fade. The bunker now. They fled through the kitchen and out the back door, the bitter cold striking them like a physical blow after the warmth of the house. Jackson's energy field created a bubble of warmth around them as they trudged through knee-deep snow toward the barn, its weathered structure barely visible through the swirling flakes. Behind them, alarm sounded from the disabled Guardian's armor, distress signals to the hovering ship. The night sky lit up with searchlights cutting through the snowfall in precise patterns. They're deploying a containment grid, Thalia explained as they reached the barn. Standard protocol for capturing valuable specimens. Roan's jaw tightened at her terminology. You are not specimens. He pressed his palm against an unremarkable section of wall, revealing a hidden scanner. You're people. People I care about. The admission hung in the frozen air between them as a section of flooring slid away, revealing a steep staircase. The intimacy of his words stirred something in Thalia. Emotions the Conclave had trained her to suppress as inefficient and primitive. The underground bunker was surprisingly spacious, its walls lined with supplies, communications equipment, and weapons. Multiple screens displayed different angles of the property, including thermal imaging of the Guardians regrouping outside the house. You've been preparing for something like this, Thalia observed. Not alien invaders specifically, Roan admitted, securing the entrance. But I've made enemies over the years, government types who'd rather certain secrets stayed buried. He turned to Jackson, whose energy field had diminished but still pulsed visibly around him. How you doing, buddy? It doesn't hurt, Jackson replied, examining his glowing hands with fascination rather than fear. It feels right, like something that was sleeping is awake now. Thalia knelt beside her son. The Conclave believed your genetic variation would manifest as enhanced telepathic abilities. This is something else entirely. It's adaptive, came a voice from behind them. They spun to find Commander Peridon standing at the foot of the stairs, his armor damaged but functional enough to have bypassed Roan's security. Roan raised his weapon, but Peridon raised empty hands. I came alone. The others are still establishing the containment grid. Why? Thalia demanded. Because what I'm witnessing changes everything. Peridon's gaze moved from Jackson to Roan, focusing on the faint energy patterns still visible on the human skin. The Conclave's fundamental research is flawed. Human and celestial genetics aren't merely compatible, they're complementary. Roan kept his weapon trained on the commander. Explain in a way that convinces me not to shoot you. Peridon's constellation patterns shifted to a configuration Thalia recognized as indicating scientific fascination, a rare display from a military commander. For centuries, we've believed our species superior. Our harvesting program was based on the premise that human genetic material could enhance ours without true integration. You've been stealing from us, Roan translated bluntly. Yes, Peridon acknowledged. But what's happening with the boy suggests something our scientists never considered. That direct interaction between our species creates emergent properties in both. Look at your arm, human. Those aren't just light patterns. Your cellular structure is changing. Roan glanced down at the fading luminescence on his skin. I feel stronger, clearer somehow. And Jackson's abilities manifested years ahead of schedule, after prolonged contact with you, Peridon continued. This challenges the entire basis of the Conclave's evolutionary strategy. Thalia stepped protectively closer to her son. Why should we believe anything you say? The Conclave exiled us, branded us as traitors. Because I've had doubts for years, Peridon admitted, his patterns shifting to indicate sincerity. The breeding program has grown increasingly cruel under Elder Vorax's direction. Children subjected to experiments that... He stopped, constellation patterns dimming with shame. I followed orders because I believed the survival of our species depended on it. The bunker fell silent except for the soft hum of Jackson's energy field. On the monitors, they could see more Guardians deploying around the property, establishing a perimeter that would be impossible to breach. What do you propose? Thalia finally asked. Alliance, Peridon said simply. The boy's abilities prove that our future lies not in harvesting humans, but in true symbiosis. Elder Vorax and his faction will resist, but with evidence others on the council will listen. Roan lowered his weapon slightly. And if they don't, then we force change, Peridon replied, his patterns shifting to a configuration Thalia had never seen before. Revolution. There are others like me in the Conclave. Scientists, warriors, geneticists who've questioned our methods. We need only a catalyst. My son is not your catalyst, Thalia said firmly. He's not a weapon or a tool. No, Peridon agreed. But he is living proof that everything we thought we knew about evolution was wrong. Our future isn't in isolation, carefully breeding for genetic purity. It's in connection. As if in response to his words, Jackson's energy field pulsed brighter, tendrils reaching out to touch each of them, connecting celestial to human in a network of shimmering light. Roan's eyes met Thalia's over the glowing web that linked them. Your call, he said quietly. I'll back whatever you decide. The trust implicit in his statement, giving her agency despite the danger to his home, his life, crystallized something in Thalia's heart. The Conclave had always made decisions, for her, had defined her worth by her genetic profile and reproductive potential. Here, on this remote farm with this unexpected human, she had found not just sanctuary, but partnership. We fight, she decided, her new star patterns brightening, with resolve, not just for Jackson but for all the children the Conclave would sacrifice in the name of evolution. As the four of them began formulating their plan, the monitors showed the Guardian's containment grid fully activated, a shimmering dome of energy enclosing the farm. What had begun as a desperate flight from persecution had transformed into something none of them could have predicted. The first true alliance between human and celestial, with the fate of both species hanging in the balance. Stardust Revolution dawn broke over the farm, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of gold and rose. The containment dome generated by the Guardian's technology created prismatic refractions across the property, a beautiful cage designed to trap them until reinforcements arrived from the Conclave mothership. In the bunker, Thalia studied the tactical display as Roan made final adjustments to their equipment. Peridon had provided access codes to the Guardian's communication network, allowing them to monitor the increasingly frantic exchanges between the ground team and Elder Vorax aboard the orbiting vessel. They know something's wrong, Peridon reported, removing his damaged helmet completely. Without it, his features revealed a face younger than his rank would suggest, his constellation patterns showing conflicted loyalty. Vorax is ordering a full assault team prepared. We have less than 3 hours. Then we move now, Roan decided, distributing modified weapons. He had spent the night integrating celestial technology from Peridon's damaged equipment into his own arsenal, creating hybrid devices that pulsed with combined power. The plan remains the same. Peridon and I neutralize the ground team. Thalia and Jackson reach the transport beam coordinates. And I transmit the evidence to the council. Thalia finished, securing a data crystal to her wrist. Inside was comprehensive documentation of the Conclave's unethical experimentation program, compiled from Peridon's classified access, along with new data about Jackson's unprecedented abilities and the genetic resonance with Roan. Jackson, who had been quietly sitting cross-legged in the corner, suddenly stood. His constellation patterns had stabilized overnight into a configuration none of them had seen before. Intricate, harmonious, neither fully celestial nor anything else known. "It won't work," he said simply. All three adults turned to him. "What won't work, sweetheart?" Thalia asked. "Fighting our way through," Jackson explained with the directness of a child stating the obvious. "We don't need to fight at all." He approached the tactical display, pointing to the containment dome's energy signature. "Their technology and ours, it's all the same energy, just shaped differently. I can feel it. Like music with different instruments." Peridon's patterns flashed with surprise. "The boy is right. Our technologies derive from the same quantum principles. But what are you suggesting?" Instead of answering, Jackson closed his eyes. His constellation patterns began to pulse in a rhythmic sequence, and the energy field around him expanded, filling the bunker with gentle luminescence. On the monitors, they watched in astonishment as the containment dome's energy signature began to fluctuate, harmonizing with Jackson's output. "He's retuning the containment field," Peridon whispered, incredulous. "Something not even our most advanced scientists have achieved." Rowan glanced at Thalia, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. "Is this dangerous for him?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Nothing in our understanding of celestial abilities predicted this." The bunker's lights flickered as Jackson's energy field intensified. On the surface, the Guardians could be seen on the monitors, frantically attempting to stabilize the containment dome as its color shifted from oppressive red to a gentler blue, then finally to a shimmering gold that matched Jackson's energy signature. "It's ready," Jackson said, opening his eyes. "We can walk through now. The dome will recognize us as part of itself." Rowan checked his weapons out of habit, then seemed to reconsider, setting them aside. "If the kid says we can walk through, I believe him." They emerged from the bunker into the crisp morning air. The Guardians spotted them immediately, raising weapons but hesitated when they saw Commander Peridon walking freely alongside the fugitives. More significantly, the containment dome no longer separated them. It had transformed into a gently, pulsing field that encompassed everyone. "Hold your fire," Peridon commanded, his voice carrying the full authority of his rank. "The situation has changed." The lead Guardian stepped forward, helmet visor sliding open to reveal a female officer whose constellation patterns marked her as Peridon's second-in-command. "Sir, Elder Vorax has ordered immediate extraction of the genetic variant and termination of the exiles." "Those orders violate our most sacred principles," Peridon responded, "and they're based on scientific falsehoods." Before the officer could respond, the air above them shimmered as a transport beam materialized, depositing a tall, austere figure onto the snow. Elder Vorax, supreme authority of the Conclave, his ancient constellation patterns elaborate with centuries of accumulated status markers. His cold gaze swept over the assembled group, lingering on Jackson with naked avarice. "Commander Peridon," he intoned, "your failure is disappointing but not unexpected. Step aside." Instead, Peridon moved protectively in front of Jackson. "The Council must review the new evidence, Elder. The boy's abilities and his connection to Go, the human male, prove our entire evolutionary strategy is flawed." "Heresy," Vorax hissed. "The purity of our lineage is a myth," Thalia interrupted, stepping forward. Her newly formed star patterns blazed with intensity. "Our ancestors were genetic engineers who modified themselves using material from multiple species. The historical records you suppressed prove it." Vorax's patterns flashed with rage. "You dare challenge millennium of tradition based on corrupted archives?" "Not just archives," Peridon added. "Living proof." He gestured to Jackson, and then to Rowan, whose skin still bore faint traces of constellation patterns. "Human and celestial genetics in harmony create something greater than either alone." Vorax raised a device, pointing it at Jackson. "The variant will be secured. The contamination eliminated." What happened next occurred with such speed that later, witnesses would debate the sequence of events. Vorax fired his weapon. Rowan lunged forward to shield Jackson. Thalia screamed a warning, and Jackson, small, determined Jackson, simply raised his hand. The energy from Vorax's weapon stopped midair, suspended in a golden matrix that pulsed with Jackson's unique frequency. Then, with a gentle gesture from the boy, the energy dissipated harmlessly into the atmosphere. "No more hurting," Jackson said, his voice echoing strangely across the snow-covered fields. "No more taking children. No more stars as chains." The containment field Jackson had retuned suddenly expanded, encompassing the entire property in a dome of golden light. Within this space, every celestial's constellation patterns began to pulse in synchrony, including Elder Vorax's, an unprecedented phenomenon that broke through millennia of hierarchical conditioning. "What is this?" Vorax demanded, fear creeping into his voice for perhaps the first time in centuries. "The truth your ancestors tried to engineer out of us," Thalia answered, understanding dawning as she felt her own patterns synchronizing. "Empathy, connection, the very traits you deemed primitive and inefficient." The Guardians, experiencing the same phenomenon, lowered their weapons one by one. Their rigid training was no match for the fundamental realignment occurring within their biological systems. "This changes nothing," Vorax insisted, though his patterns betrayed his uncertainty. "The Council is receiving this transmission now," Peridon interrupted, indicating a small device on his wrist. "Every moment since your arrival has been recorded and broadcast to all Council members. Your willingness to violate our most sacred laws regarding the protection of children is evident for all to see." From the orbiting ship came an incoming transmission, the full Council, their collective patterns indicating the formal configuration used only for binding judgments. "Elder Vorax," intoned the lead counselor, her ancient face filling the projected image above them. "You are relieved of authority pending investigation. Commander Peridon will assume temporary control of this mission." Vorax's patterns dimmed, with shock and rage, but surrounded by Guardians whose loyalties had shifted, he could only stand in impotent fury as Peridon accepted the Council's directive. As the immediate crisis diffused, Thalia found herself standing beside Roan, watching, as Jackson maintained the golden energy field with seemingly effortless concentration. "What happens now?" Roan asked quietly. "Everything changes," Thalia replied. "The Conclave will be forced to reevaluate its entire relationship with Earth. The breeding program will end." "And us?" Roan's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "You and Jackson?" Thalia's newly formed star patterns brightened at his touch. "The farm needs tending," she said simply. "Jackson needs stability, education, and I—" She hesitated, then continued with newfound certainty. "I need this. What we've built here." Around them, Guardians were standing down. Peridon was coordinating with the Council, and arrangements were being made to return to the ship. But in this moment, surrounded by the golden light of her son's unprecedented abilities, Thalia knew their true home wasn't among the stars anymore. "We stay," she decided, "not as exiles, but as ambassadors of a new understanding between our peoples." Jackson approached them, the energy field condensing to follow him like a gentle aura. "Can we keep the chickens?" he asked, the cosmic concerns of revolution giving way to a child's practical priorities.